Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Shop Philosophy. As always, I'm your host, Killian Hobbs, managing editor for Being Libertarian, LLC. So with everything going on, everyone is inundated with information and updates regarding COVID-19. Everyone knows, I'm just going to throw it out there, even though most of the people that are listening to this aren't stupid. Wash your hands, try to keep a distance from people, wipe down surfaces if and as you get the chance. Very basic hygiene things that I think we probably should have been doing well before there was a global pandemic, just for general cleanliness. But that aside, take care of yourselves and be safe out there. That said, everyone's being inundated with a lot of information regarding this. Obviously, it's a week old now, so we're starting to see it politicized. We're seeing people in libertarian circles talking about the way the government's being able to shut everything down and just being contrarian to that. We're seeing like neo-fascists and like talking about how Venice waters are finally clean and how shutting down the borders is so great. We're seeing advocates from the left talking about how this is going to be a proof and point that UBI could work. We're seeing a lot of the talk circling around what's currently happening, as most things usually do. I'm not going to, take any, not going to take the wind out of the sails of anybody that's, talking about some of the impacts as they're happening. For today's episode, though, I wanted to go into something a little different. I wanted to talk about what this is going to look like after. We've had massive sweeping changes, a complete tone change in the politics, in how we're looking at the economy, everything like that. But there's been very little talk about what things are going to look like once it goes back to quote-unquote normal. Now, this is a big topic, so I'm not going to just run your ear off solo. So I'm going to get to the point here. Today, I've got a guest on for people that have been listening to the show for a while, or at least are familiar with Think Liberty. Please welcome Vinny Marshall back to the show.
Hey, how's it going, man? Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. One question I got to ask, how do you feel about everyone saying that your law is going to be coming into effect?
Oh, it's funny. Yeah.
All the martial laws.
I know. That's probably one of the more entertaining things, right? From what's been transpiring is finding out how many people actually don't know how to spell that in this context. I've honestly been surprised at the rate. I didn't think this was that common a misunderstanding, but you learn something new every day.
Well, it's like all the talk about borders with an A.
Right.
Yes. Every time I see that, it's like, you almost had a point, but I just can't give you the credit at this point. You fucked it up. You're done. You're out. Goodbye.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also nothing says like topic master, right? Like, misspelling the core the thing on the topic that you're talking about. Right. Like I really know what I'm talking about. And to further show you just how much I know what I'm talking about, I'm going to misspell the thing that I'm obsessed with.
Not really. Let me tell you all about Kafifi.
Right. 19.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking too, as you were talking about that, you're saying wash your hands. It's a pity, just in general, but it's a shame that Jordan Peterson, has been under the weather as of late. I feel like he really missed an opportunity here. You know what I'm saying? Like Mr. Clean Your Room could have really doubled down on some of that. Like he could have even pulled like an "I told you so,"
or hell, even Stefan Molyneux. Like all the people home now, keeping their eggs safe. Like fuck.
That's right. Hey, well now you don't have to. God, with that like infamously horrible take where he's like, he goes into that, like just paints this picture. He's like, oh, you're sitting in a bathroom, pumping milk out of your fucking feminism. I don't know what.
Yeah. Well,
so everybody being home, so he's happy, right?
Well, yeah, it's like the one that's been killing me are the like the fash wave types that are posting stuff. Like it's some of it's been hysterical. Like they're talking about, oh well, the Venice waters are finally clean, and the people are staying home and spending time with their families, and degeneracy has been canceled. Like it's like, so you want to build a fucking statue to a virus after this? This is probably coming from the same people that don't believe in vaccinations to begin with. So hey,
yeah, the COVID altar. I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, COVID Ultra, like MK Ultra, but just to point out how many people are stupid. But anyway,
there you go. Yeah.
So like I said, before we've been on the air for like 2 minutes, and we're just like total sidebar.
Okay, we got to catch up. We got we've got some time to make up for here. It's been a while since we chatted on the podcast.
No, definitely. So yeah, what we want to focus on is some of the impacts after the fact. So I'll give a couple examples, and we'll go into a little more detail with each of the examples and come up with a few further ones. But things that I've noticed from this is that, pretty much every state and country and the like have put out their own internal lists of what they're considering essential services. It differs from state to state or country to country. So, for example, up here in Canada, we've got telecommunications are considered an essential service, convenience stores, gas stations, most forms of retail that involve either food or office supplies for the people that are working at home, pet food, pet care, telecommunications, all of these are being considered essential services.
When you say telecommunications, you're talking about like cell phone carrier stores and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, not all of them. Some of the cell phone stores are shut down. Some of them staying open because they're inside of other stores that are essential. So like if you go into a Walmart, the Walmart's going to still have the phone guys in there, or Best Buy's because they've got or Costco or any of those guys because they've got the phone guys inside. Those places can stay open because they're listed as an essential. And at least somewhere physical has to be able to replace phones.
Yeah. It's such a weird time right now. Like I'm in Costco. So I'm thankfully I went to Costco before all this kind of popped off. Mm-hmm. I had that dad gut feeling, and I was like, I think I'm gonna go to Costco. I'm gonna get some things just in case shit gets rough here. And to anyone listening, I didn't go and get like 90, bags of toilet paper. No, I didn't. I just got what I needed. I got one thing of toilet paper, one thing of paper towels, and I got some food. But it was already pretty bad, right? The Costco was already pretty packed. So I mean, I say that to say like the mood was already clearly set. Mm-hmm. And man, the timing was perfect. It was just hours after I got into the store. I think it was at like the second store, just grabbing some other things, and that's when they shut down the schools. And I could only imagine what those stores look like after that. But I went in there. I go to Costco, and like just kind of to your point, the people inside the stores, right, that end up selling stuff. So you know how you can go into Costco and they'll be selling like solar or stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's a line to check out, literally going the length of this Costco, right? Like Costco's are huge. Mm-hmm. And so the line to get to the register goes from the registers like all the way to the meat department in the back of the Costco where my spot is, right? And there's this guy walking up and down like, anyone interested in solar? Anybody?
Ooh.
And I'm just like, what a time to be alive, right? Like when...
God.
Sorry.
Well, it's like, speaking of that one, that was really funny too, right? Like, a whole bunch of places started to sell out. I didn't get the chance to get out and buy like my regular things before all the weekend craziness hit when things first popped off there. But I was just out there and I just said, I have an idea. I think I shared this with you before. I posted on my page there a little while ago, but I just had a thought, just an inkling that maybe people are this stupid. So I go to a Chinese grocer I know. Like they're a big box store, not like a little like convenience store. Like they own a big box store, a thing called like Nations, I think was the name of the place. Mm-hmm. So I go in there after the weekend craziness. They've got literally everything. They've got like bread, it's on sale. They've got milk, it's on sale. They've got toilet paper, 8 packs, like 2 for $10, which in Canadian dollars actually isn't that bad. Like I was just looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute. It's like, so wait, like I came here being a shit expecting it to be empty. And these guys were like fully stocked, basically begging people to come in and buy stuff. And I'm like, oh, for fuck's sakes, people, really?
It's because it's a China virus, right? You're going to.
Oh yeah, the China virus, the Kung flu.
Yeah, that toilet paper has SARS, so you can't.
Yeah, exactly.
No one wants to buy it.
Well, like I understand.
That's kind of the case, though. Not Not that, right. I mean, not that that stuff. But I mean, I think that's kind of the case. Like, I think people generally, like, their knee-jerk reaction is like, I'm going to go to the local grocery store, right? Mm-hmm. Like the place that they're used to going, and they didn't think that there are these other kind of like tertiary stores that aren't your like the big name chains. Because the same was out here too. There was some stores, and it you know, it wasn't like specifically like the Chinese market or whatever, but some of the smaller places had more inventory for longer. I think people just, it didn't even register for some folks.
Well, yeah, like it took a while for, like, it was probably until like maybe the Monday, Tuesday that like drugstores and like started to sell out of this stuff because everyone went to the regular big boxes, right? But that actually is, you know, one of the impact points as far as the post this is going to be concerned, right? Because that's a lot of people that are starting to expose themselves to these other businesses and starting to go, okay, wait a minute, you know, when these guys couldn't take care of us, I was still able to get my, you know, my essential needs from, you know, businesses B, C, and D just because my A store didn't have it. So I think that when we're looking at how things are going to change and how things are going to shift after the fact, I think that that's one of the big ones is people are going to shop at a lot of different places just because out of necessity they've had to. So they're kind of exposing themselves to those other businesses that they might not have been doing before.
I think that's a good point. So I was thinking about this earlier when, I mean, obviously, right? Like, I hate to, you know, I hate to break the wall for everyone listening, but we do talk about these topics before the record button is hit. And, you know, I was thinking about this, and man, I would love to say, I think the hope at least is that we can look at this and we can say, okay, people are going to realize that all these positive things, right? The kind of stuff that you're talking about, right? People are going to realize that maybe they have to go to different places to get the different things that they need, or maybe they're going to realize that they need to be more prepared for things, right? And I was really kind of challenging myself to think to really try and honestly answer, do you think that that'll change stuff though? But I'm not sure it will, right? I'm not completely convinced that this has any lasting effect on people. I wouldn't be surprised if the moment that things go back to normal and whatever, you know, the concerns of the spread are stemmed one way or another, that people don't just generally go right back to that comfortable kind of laziness.
I think that a good portion of it's going to depend on how long it lasts. Like, I know some places have basically shut down schools for literally the rest of the school year. They're not going to start back up until September. Some businesses are talking about redeveloping a whole bunch of their tech stuff so that they are at home online only until they get a 100% all clear. And even then, they're not sure how necessary their office spaces are going to be in the future forward. Like, if this is over by mid-April, then I think the only thing that'll really happen is that people have some talking points for the regular back and forth politics. But other than a little bit more, like a little bit extra general cleanliness, because people are starting to catch on to how easily things can spread, I think that will probably stick around for a little bit, because once people start getting a little OCD about something, it actually takes quite a time for like that habit to break and for them to go back to the normal laziness about things. But like long term though, I'm just thinking to myself, you know, how many, like, especially in, you know, more quote unquote right wing circles, like more pro-capitalist circles, the amount of just general shit talking against people that are considered low skill, right? I mean, how often do you hear people, you know, quite poorly say, oh, you know, if you're working a low skill job, then, you know, just don't be poor, like do better. Like, and that's as much, like that's as much.
Go out and get a better paying job, man. Like, what do you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Like, you know what? Just pull yourself up by the boots. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Which people forget that whole phrase was based on the fact that it is impossible to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Like, just when you think about it for 2 seconds, it's a physical impossibility. Like, it was originally designed as a joke, and then people were like, "Oh yeah, you know what? That sounds great." But Now all of a sudden, everyone's realizing like
that they proudly say too.
Yeah, I'm proud to defy. I'm so proud to defy physics. It's great.
Which I mean, look, but and not to get on a tangent. Maybe that's kind of the only way I talk, but like, it is possible, right? Like what people are talking about, because I can relate to that in a way. I remember a time in my life where I was like primarily pretty lazy, or my work ethic wasn't great. I was trying to do the wrong kind of stuff. Like I was trying to do like labor work and stuff like that. I did for a few years, and it was just I didn't have work ethic for that. But once I found the industry that I was more interested in, I discovered my work ethic and stuff like that. And I think there's something to that rhetoric behind, like, you just got to get it together and get yourself going. But 100%. I think that it also discounts all of the people that work ethic is there, right? But the opportunities aren't.
Oh yeah, like the funny thing too, and I mean, like you look at anyone that makes it in the music industry, or some of the people that move up or anything like that. If you ask any of them about any of their success stories, it's either sheer dumb luck because right person was in the right place at the right time, or because of like who they knew or when they grew up, they had the right connections to get in and do what they wanted to do. Like, I think I've talked about it on a previous episode, and if I haven't, I'm going to bring it up anyway. An excellent book on that stuff is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Like, he even talks about like how most pro hockey players tend to be born in January, simply because they're going to be a bigger person in 5th grade than someone born later in the year, because they do it entirely by age groups. And then obviously the bigger players are going to have better motor skills, which means they're going to get more specialized coaching, move up faster. Most of the like pro NHL league is born before March. And it's just like, it's one of those like sheer happenstance outside of a lot of people's control can be the make it or break it for a lot of those things. But at the same time, you can still go out and create those opportunities by exposing yourself more often, trying more often, taking those steps back and looking at yourself and saying, okay, so why am I only here? How do I get there? What's at least the next step going to look like? And at least doing something about that.
Yeah.
But going back to the main topic a little bit here, even with that in mind, at the end of the day, the world's always going to need ditch diggers.
No, for sure. Well, I mean,
like obviously everybody wants to
start somewhere.
Yeah, like everyone wants to move up. Everyone's going to want to get a better job, but it doesn't discount the necessity of some of those jobs right now. And I think that mindset, like the way that people look at, like retail and food services, like the amount of people that are freaking out right now because they can't sit in a restaurant, all of them up here are takeout only for the ones that are still open. Like the amount of people that are freaking out about that, it's like, this was, day-to-day stuff for you, getting like served by people constantly. And now that you can't get served by people, all of a sudden the world's falling apart.
I do like that aspect of it. I feel the idea of taking people more seriously in these positions, because that's been something that's bugged me for a long time, right? It's like it's looked at as like some kind of joke for people to work at, like, for example, like maybe Taco Bell, right? Mm-hmm. I fucking love Taco Bell. I would be so bummed out if no one wanted to work at Taco Bell anymore and I couldn't go get Taco Bell, right? And we have a lot of faith and trust in those people at Taco Bell, right? Like you are trusting them enough not to hawk Lugers in your food, right? For one. That's somewhat important stuff. And I think that people are starting to see those things, because I don't think working in a grocery store was particularly an appealing, route for anyone before this. And now people are talking about, like, make sure you appreciate your essential workers in grocery stores. So it seems as though opinions are changing on those kind of things. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Like, that's something that I hope that's something that continues for quite a while after too. Cause like retail and food service guys, like you already know that they're getting paid shit, and then they have to deal with the general public. And let's be honest, humans as a species, especially when they've got the mindset of I'm the one paying, I get it my way. are
just
going to be in just complete douche mode from that point forward. So
yeah, Karens. Yeah.
Yeah, the Karens. Yeah, exactly. Right. and it's funny too, because like my main job, I've made my way up through sales and retail. And I do pretty good for myself just having moved up in that like career line. Like the opportunities even in those jobs, like you'd be not necessarily like surprised, but people would be surprised if they saw what like an assistant manager or a manager at a Walmart makes. Like Walmart managers make six figures, like, and that's just, most of them have been in the job maybe, 10, 15 years. So if they started off when they were, high school students or whatever else, by the time they're in their 40s or so, they could end up running a store. Like it's not a career path that people should be laughing at, especially when at the end of the day, most of them could just tell you to fuck off and get off their business, like to get out of their stores. But they still deal with people being douchebags day in, day out. So like after this whole COVID thing is done, that's something that I would really like to see stay. And I think it's going to be like, from an economic perspective, I think it's going to be really interesting what that looks like when individual workers and unions and the like start talking wages. I think that one's going to be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of interesting conversations to have as a result of this, right? Like, I think the working from home thing is super interesting too. Because I think this is something that, like, like how many reports do we have to read at this point, right? That talk about how it's been objectively proven time and time again that employees are more productive, happier, better people and employees overall when they're able to work from home freely, right? There's a flexible schedule, or flexible approach at schedules. But still in workplaces, even in workplaces that are like pretty forward thinking when it comes to this stuff, it's still kind of an topic, right? Like people are still like, or at least, prior to this, people were still like, yeah, but it's better if you're in the office. Kind of, there's that weird thing that still, it just won't go away. Right. And I think for sure what has happened as a result of this is because we don't have a choice right now. Like, I mean, more than half the country is forced right now to work from home, whether they want to or not, bosses and employees alike. Yeah. Right. And I think businesses are seeing that this can happen, and the roof is not going to go and get set on fire because people are working from home. And I think that's a good thing as well.
Yeah. And I mean, like, the only real, like, quote unquote benefit as far as working out of an office versus working from home is concerned is either for the people with, a terrible ability to focus, like the ones that can't just like dive in on their work, but realistically, they probably weren't going to dive into their work all that much at the office anyway. And then obviously getting some face time with people, like having that face-to-face time, but setting the entire, like, the amount of things that go around having an office space in general. Like, you're looking at all of the money that's put into development and property, like the property ownership or the rents or the even the property taxes on some of those buildings. Realistically, for almost, I'd say, like the majority of office spaces, you could downsize those, throw 600 companies into one of those office buildings and just make the whole thing a server room, and people could take care of everything else from home.
Yeah, or just have offices be something that's like a big open workspace, right? And then you've got like 4 or 5 conference rooms, and it's just like, hey, show up when you need to show up and meet with people. You have a desk here if you need to use it, conference room if you want to use that. Don't have to be here, but if you'd like to, you have space for your meetings or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and I mean, especially with if you just watch just general buying habits right now, the amount of like small TVs and monitors that are being purchased, headsets, everything like that, people are going to be all equipped to do their work from home going forward, because they've had to rush out and buy all these supplies for themselves that they just never really bothered with before, because all that stuff was at the office for them. And again, that's one of those things where if things get back to normal too quickly, I don't think that either employers will action it or employees will like fight for it to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, this is unnecessary. But if it's long term, I think I have a chance.
It could be the case. I think even in the limited time that it's been going on, it's given employers enough to chew on, right? Because you got to think about, or at least for me, I'm in the West Coast, so we've been under this whole thing for a bit now. A mixture of two things. I think California was one of the first, if not the first, to do the shelter-in-place order. And
yeah, I think they were one of the other ones.
Yeah, and then aside from that, like a lot of these places kind of sent everyone remote before that order came, right? So I was working at home a week before the order came just because my work was pretty on top of it, right? They were like, hey, things are getting kind of crazy. If you want to work from home, you feel more comfortable working from home, you go ahead and do that. And so I've been there for a while, at least locked down here. And wow. So in saying that, I'm assuming others have too, right? And these companies are already feeling this financially in a sense, right? And so you have to assume that they're not paying to keep the lights on as often all throughout the day, right? They're already seeing kind of the financial kickback that comes from not having to keep an office up and on all day, 5 days a week, sometimes 7, whatever. I don't know. So I think that's already there, right? I think all of the ingredients for getting the workplace to notice this a little bit more are already kind of mixed in the pot, if that makes sense, right? Like they're already seeing what the cost differences of keeping the lights turned on in this place 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and then sending everyone home, turning the lights off. And they're seeing that both work's getting done both ways, right? Yeah, but things cost a certain amount every day this way, and they cost a different amount every day this way. And I think that there is enough for employers to really chew on and start considering things differently.
Yeah. And I mean, like when you take a look at like office supplies and stuff like that, I mean, they can transition that over to just, an expense account instead of having to order mass supplies for the entire office. They, expensing partial expenses on equipment rather than fully purchasing equipment for all the staff as they go through. And half the time, if people want to like upgrade their equipment, they'll probably pay out of pocket to just not have to deal with a computer from 2006. Like half the time, like the companies will be saving money on that stuff. They'll be saving massive amounts of money when it comes to either renting the places out or actually paying the property taxes on the ownership of the buildings. And the employees are going to be saving that gas money and being able to expense certain things and write things off on taxes, which just means that it's going to be more appealing to work for the companies that have the work at home option.
I wonder too, I'm curious, right? Because like in my work, we have an IT department, and I'm curious if I would want to know if people working from home increased or decreased the amount of work coming to the IT department. Right. Like I wonder if people are more willing to just like throw their hands up and walk to IT if they're just a couple desks over, as opposed to like trying to fix their problem themselves at home when the IT guy isn't just like, you're not able to just reach out and tap on him. Hey, help me, how come my computer won't do this or that? I wonder if there's anything there. I don't know if it's the case. I don't really bother my IT guys much, but
yeah,
there's a difference there.
Like for my company, all of our field support guys, they're doing pure work from home, and all they need to do to work from home versus work from office is just be granted system access, and they granted it to themselves so they could do it. We've had absolutely no variance in how our business operates. Like our entire head office, it's near one of the international airports for our head office, right? So they shut that down real quick just for general vicinity to everything going on. And couldn't tell you a single difference as far as how day-to-day operations have worked for our company. Not a single difference so far.
Yeah, man. That's,
if anything, I'm getting faster responses just because there's no chance that person's being pulled aside to go deal with something in the office or go talk to someone or having to walk away from their desk, because now we're just calling like their company phone instead of calling like a landline that has to go through a whole thing to get to a person. And it's just like,
and that's
why could it not have been like this entire time?
Right. Well, you mentioned there at the top of this, right? Like you were talking about focus, right? And you said that something about like it might be harder to focus. Man, I work in an open environment, right? So I have an open workspace, and it's not great for focus. I swear to God, every time I sit down, because I think every job probably has this stuff, right? Like there's certain things that you need to do where it's like, and maybe not you do a lot of sales, but for me, there's a lot of stuff that sometimes it's like, all right, I'm going to put on my headphones. I'm going to open up my computer and I just got to like dig into some code or some data or something, right? Then I can't be interrupted. Like I really got to dig into this stuff and get it done, right? And I know it's going to take a while, and I know it's somewhat advanced, so I got to really pay attention to it. And that is just so hard to get that kind of work done in an open office environment. Because every time, like I sit down and I put on my headphones, someone's like, "Oh, hey, excuse me." It's like,
it's time. Like, oh, I hear you. Like, for my job, that's I usually set aside one day a week to get all my operations work done, because then I can take all of it, go into a side office, just close the door, be left alone, and just leave my guys on the floor and just take care of all of it in one go. Like, just devote a day to fixing it, and then. Otherwise, if I have to deal with like general humans, it's just whether it's staff, customers, whatever else, I'm just not going to get it done. I think there was I can't remember who put the study out, but they calculated based on some brain activity and just general things like that, that anytime that you're interrupted while doing something, it takes up to 20 minutes to regain full focus on whatever task it is you're trying to perform.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And it's like, if only there was a way to make it so that people could focus without being interrupted.
Right.
The one thing, like, now we've talked about the workspaces a little bit, but the one that I'm kind of on the fence for. Like a lot of the other stuff I can kind of predict, or at least vaguely predict the way that it'll go. You know, like when it comes to the work at home stuff, we know that that's going to probably go in the positive direction. When it comes to the way like retail workers are going, that's probably going to go the positive direction. You know, people are people, but fingers crossed hygiene stays up. Like a lot of that stuff's kind of easy to predict. The one that
one would hope at least it right. Like I'd hate to say it and then be proven wrong, but I would like to, you know, it's got all the pieces are there for that to be the case. I hope that's the case. And I think that any rational person, it should be the case, but you know, people are pretty shitty. So
yeah, it's like at the very least, you know, like obviously like the face masks and gloves are going to go away after all this, along with people like carrying around Purell on them everywhere they go. That stuff will probably, you know, die off on the side, but just washing your damn hands and keeping your fingers out of your face. Like you're not 5, for fuck's sakes. Yeah, clean your room. Just listen to the lobsters. They will tell you all. But the one that I'm on the fence on to see is how this is going to impact education. That one I think is going to be tricky because like some parents are looking at it and going, oh, you know what? This homeschooling thing, like I start going through stuff with my kids and just talking to them and knowing my kids, all of a sudden my kids are picking up on stuff where they were like getting C's in this stuff, but I walk them through it and all of a sudden they're understanding this stuff. This is awesome. And then other people
what about the parents that are sitting down with their kids and, not every school is sending their kids home with learning plans, right? Like I've got kids and some of them were sent home. I had 3 kids, 2 of them were in school. You know, one of them was sent home with a learning plan. They're different schools, and another wasn't. Right, and I'm sure this is the case with many kids. And so you sit down with the kids that don't have like a learning plan, and I'm curious how many parents are sitting down with their kids who don't have a learning plan. They're like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to pick up something that's got kind of recommendations for this the grade that my child's in. We're going to try to go over some stuff, and they're going to sit there and try to work on it, and they end up like, how don't you know this? Right, or something like that along those lines, where they start questioning, like, wait, what the hell are you doing every day then? Like I thought.
Well, yeah, it's like the one that'll be really interesting to see. Like, there's a lot of aspects on the education side that I think are going to be really interesting because there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to start singing the praises of how important teachers are because they're just not going to be able to handle it at home. there's going to be other people that are like, okay, wait, but when I give this focus time to my kid, they're learning more than they were when I was sending them to school. So wait a minute, there's something wrong with the education system if this is how this is working out. Like I know quite a few people that are teachers up here, and they're getting the same kind of mixed feedback of, they have a whole bunch of people that are now like singing their praises and saying like, teachers need the utmost respect. They need to be considered like the best people on earth because of what they deal with a class of like 30 of these things every single day. And then other people are starting to say, how does my kid like 8 years old and has trouble spelling his own name? How is that even a concept? What are you people doing? I mean, obviously that's going to vary like school to school, teacher to teacher, area to area, but just long term, the eye opening that I think some parents are having actually being exposed to their own children, as just backwards as that sounds.
No, I mean, look, it's a trip. And I think that, I'm glad you pointed out, like we said, as backwards as that sounds, because I think that people mostly just assume that everyone else is checking up on their kids and what they're doing in school. Right. And I think that there's a probably larger than we would be comfortable with number of people than we assumed that are just learning kind of like what their kid knows and where they're at with school. Mm-hmm. I think that there's probably a lot of people that are kind of learning their kids more than they ever have before, right? Like there's tons of people out there that are in homes where both parents have to work, right? They don't have a choice. You know what I mean? That's just what they have to do. It's not, it has nothing to do, and it's not any kind of statement about them as people or parents, right? That's just the situation that they're in, right? And your dynamic with your kids is going to change completely when the only time you're spending entire days with them is 2 days during the weekend, right? When you don't have to do any responsibility type stuff, right? It's the weekend. It's cool, right? It's everyone's day off. And now people are forced into these positions where they have to introduce structure and rules and things like that with their kids when they're just used to being at work during those times. And they're probably learning like a different side to their children that they're not as used to.
Yeah. And the other thing that's going to be interesting too, like, again, this is all conjecture. It all depends on how long this thing lasts. Like, considering some of the net positives that could come out of this, like hoping that you don't see like a lot of long-term negatives, especially with like the rising death cases and everything like that. But if this lasts long enough, I think one thing that'll be really interesting with parents having them at home, because let me rewind this a little bit and set a bit of a frame to what I'm about to say. Do you remember that show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Oh yeah. Foxworthy.
Yeah. So think of the amount of stuff that people, because standard education works off the concept of rote learning, where you're constantly just exposed to the information over and over again. And most people are only going to retain it long enough to pass a test on it. And then some information will stick around afterwards, but most of it's going to disappear, 20, 30 years later. Like by the time you enter adulthood and you finish up, grade 5, grade 6, a lot of that stuff's just...
Years. Buddy,
well,
I forgot how to do long division the day I graduated.
Right. It's like for me, when I have to crunch numbers and all that stuff, people are like, okay, so how did you reach this number? And I'm like, honestly, I couldn't tell you. Like, I saw numbers, I put them together in my head, and this is how I got here. It's going to take me like 5 minutes to reteach myself shortly while I'm working through the numbers, how I got to the answer. I remember how to get there, but the show your answer thing did not stick around.
Yeah, go ask the Excel spreadsheet how I got to my answer.
Right. But with that in mind, like I think a lot of parents are going to walk into this unequipped to be able to actually teach some of these concepts, like to teach some of this stuff. Like
sure. I think they're going to be like really overwhelmed.
A lot of the parents are going to be overwhelmed because they're going to have to sit there for like 3-4 hours to actually learn a day's worth of their child's education to be able to say, okay, so, all right, we've done an hour of, basic mathematics. I was kind of okay there because calculators exist. Let's, let's look at European geography. Just just something, maybe this is me being semi-racist, but there's something about Americans trying to teach geography to people that's just, it makes me like laugh and cry at the same time, considering some of the conversations I've had with people from the States.
Yeah.
Like it was like that survey a while back where they were asking random people if they supported the bombing of Agrabah.
Oh no.
And it was funny because none of the survey responses were, that's the made up place from Aladdin. Almost all the survey responses were just, I'm a Democrat. No, I'm a Republican. Yes.
Gotta toe the line, man.
You just toe that line.
It's true, right? That the American, what's the term for it? I'm forgetting. You're smart.
American centricism.
Yeah, that's a real problem, right? Like you get, I get into these arguments with people all the time about, not all the time, but like it's one of the things that we debate about, this idea of like objective morality. And granted, for anyone listening, when I talk about the idea of objective morality, right, it's not an idea that you're arguing about whether or not morality exists. I think it's clear that morals objectively exist, right? That's okay. We can all agree on that. It's the argument that when people are trying to say that, okay, there is objectively one right set of morals, right? And which seems insane to me, right? Like I find them to be subjective in that a human being's opinion is needed to have a moral position. Right. And then that it deals with the subject, therefore making it subjective. Right. Yeah, that opinion is not there when you remove the person. Yeah.
It's impossible to have a subjective social construct. An objective social construct. It's a social construct that's going to be subjective by default.
Exactly right. And so this is a discussion or the debate that I try to engage in with people. And I bring this up, it's kind of a roundabout way to get there, to talk about the fact that only Americans do you get into this argument, but it just shows how narrow that knowledge or that understanding of kind of I hate to put it this way, the world is, right? Because it just assumes that this Western, it almost feels like you're not allowed to say that anymore. Western culture, like it's.
Well, I mean, it's the way the Americans do. I mean, the way Americans do it, it's Western chauvinism. Like that is like probably the most apt term.
Right. Well, I mean, look, people are raised in these systems, right? You were raised in a legal system that says these things are bad and those things are good. Right. And then you've got people like running around. It's like, no. You remove people and these things are still good or bad objectively. It's like, what are you talking about? Like your frame of reference for understanding this is so small, right? Because it's only the fish tank that you've lived in. You're basing your understanding of these things on what has been given to you from the society that you're a part of. And you're just assuming that the rest of the world is exactly that same way.
Well, yeah, it's like if it's one thing that I find that it doesn't matter what ilk they come from. If it's one thing that Americans get like really on edge about when I start talking about it, it's the fact that the Constitution is the highest law in the land. The law is simply a piece of paper that some people agreed on to say that this is how things are going to work. So it's just another law. The Constitution, like the amount of just bloody anarchists in the U.S. And I mean, American anarchists are just such a different animal from anarchists in literally any other country. But American anarchists that are like, yeah, we're just going to have natural rights like the Constitution grants us. What?
I've seen this too. Like, yeah, natural right. If you don't believe in natural rights, you can go take a look at the Bill of Rights. I'm like, you mean that document written by people?
So natural. Yeah. It's because it was on papyrus, right? No.
Oh, how dare you? It's papyrus, by the way. But we don't talk about that. Goddamn font face around here.
No, it's like I always try to just the fact that you corrected me on that. Random side note has absolutely nothing to do with anything. For any British out there that are listening, and this is something that I got into like a big argument in real life about this recently. I don't care if it's your language. The word drawing doesn't have a second R in it.
Drawing.
It's not fucking drawing.
Well, it's like kind of like the wash.
Yeah, like I'll give you aluminium, as weird as that shit is, but I'm not giving you drawing.
Right.
Brits can fuck off for just like a hard second there.
No,
going back to
no, that's true though. No, I think that's totally valid, right? Like there's some like some people will say like there's also one you'll hear like some people say demon and they can't not put a D at the end of it.
Demoned, yeah,
yeah. And look, I get it. Like we all have our habits, but like, they try to argue. They're like, "Ah, that's the way I say it." No, that's incorrect, right? There's not that letter isn't there. It's like with drawing, right? Yeah. Like it's not just a quirky thing. It's that's wrong.
Exactly. It's like, again, complete random side note. I don't know what brought it. Like it just came into my head, but
sure.
I've been meaning to say that to some British people for a while now. I don't care if it's your language. You can get fucked. So
is it in there or no? Is there another R? Or is it just the way they say it? Even though
it's just the way they say it. I have no fucking idea where they come up with this shit.
Like, well, I don't know, right? Like you fucking people put U's and shit like color and all.
I can answer
maybe they're
that
sneaking
one,
another R into that, or
well, I can speak to that. Actually, I can speak to that. Random history lesson for people. The reason that Americans dropped the U's in a lot of those words was because in British and by extension most Commonwealth presses, print was charged by the word. In the States, it was charged by the letter. A lot of spelling differences in U.S. English have to do with the shrinking of the words to remove unnecessary letters from the spelling, because you can do color without needing the U, same as like humorous. Which is weird because you guys added an L to canceled.
Right. So and I was just about to say, know where like, that there's all these situations where they feel like there's words or letters that don't need, like all it does is help to confuse the pronunciation.
Well, and it's weird because like in Canada, we get exposed to both spellings, right? We see we see both because of just general exposure to American media. And then the fact that we're still a Commonwealth country. So our official spelling is the British way for everything, but we don't critique if you use the American spelling because it's just interchangeable. Anyway, this is this would be great if like for the kids that are currently at home, if you have kids, you can use this to teach them about some of the history of letterings and things like that. It has nothing to do with anything. But to this point though, right? To this point, when we're talking about like parents that are trying to educate their kids at home and everything like that, there's just a lot of this type of information that they're going to go through, and a lot of these things they're going to look at and they're going to say, okay, well, that sounds great and all, but either they're going to reinforce a lot of these things that were just ignorantly regurgitated to them, like what you were talking about when it led into how people come to this objective morality concepts and things like that. And that's just going to cement another bad generation of this kind of thinking. But I think that one that'll be really interesting with it, if it goes that route, will be the amount of parents that start teaching their kids practical things again. Like the amount of people my age, I'm coming up on 30 this year. The amount of people in my age group that couldn't tell you what a catalytic converter does, like in a car, or actually be able to do an oil change.
A lot of cars these days don't have them.
Well, yeah, that's fair, but that's a fair point. But like, I mean, I was there's a business open up here recently, a couple weeks ago here anyway, but there was people lined up for like the basic sewing lessons that they had, and it's like, I mean, first off, internet exists if you're looking for a certain pattern or something like that, but it just kind of struck me with the amount of people that were looking for that. It's like, mending clothes is one of those, like being able to put like a button back in, like maybe not like full on like sewing and just taking cloth and turning it into something to wear, but basic repairs and stuff like that should just be something you pick up over time. Like there's a lot of skills, and I think you find that with like different generation gaps. Like obviously, like people that are like millennials and Gen Z, there's some stuff tech wise that they didn't even know. They couldn't tell you how they learned about it. They just know that certain things work certain ways. Whereas like we always make the joke with the older generation about, having to tell them did you turn it on and off to see if something actually worked, or did you have it plugged in? Joe Biden, how do I open a JPEG, Jack? Like,
wasn't someone on the news teaching him how to cough recently?
Right. Yeah, it's like
that guy.
And you can see like some of those knowledge gaps generationally. It's just because at some point in the generational chain, there were certain just skills that we were like, hey, you know what? I guess, I guess we don't need to teach this, or we're going to assume that the schools are going to teach it for us. So I think the hopeful eye opening of this is some people are going to be able to say, okay, there's some really basic shit my kids don't know. And we really need to make sure that they know this because this is kind of frightening.
Yeah. I mean, I think there'll be a little bit of that. I think there's also going to be a little bit of, right. I think the best way to present this way. I think people often kind of get into the thing where they feel like they have to work. Right. Mm-hmm. Like the both parents have to work. And I've seen this happen with my friends. It's happened to me before, where you just kind of feel like, okay, I have to work. And then you start thinking about, okay, well, here, I got to go get daycare or whatever I need to do to have my kids taken care of when they're young, while I'm working. And it's hard to step away from that once it's initiated. But in those situations, often, and if anyone listening that has been in this situation, I'm sure they can relate, where you kind of miss the fact that if like the cost eclipse what you're able to pay, right? Like you're not net gaining anything really. You know what I mean? You're just ending up paying more because of costs for daycare or whatever else, right? And it's sometimes, as obvious as it may seem, it's tough for people to realize that, I actually save money by staying home with the kids. Well, and that's not, granted, it's not always the case, but sometimes that is the case. And it's hard for people to see it because they're just kind of like, that they're just, it's just like drilled into them that this is what you have to do to get by. And, yeah, I mean, that's the route you have to take. And I think that this is kind of forcing people to realize we can actually do this. Like this might be doable.
Like, I think one that'd be really interesting with that too is just like, I mean, we could make a whole like other episode just about the pros and cons of, the Western hustle culture, which I guess is probably the best way, like the way that I would describe it is the idea that like you can't have a hobby unless you can profit off it. You know what I mean? Like some people, like it gets a little extreme in some of those degrees.
No, it does. It does. And I'm in a hotbed of it, right? The industry, I work in tech on the West Coast, and it gets like you get to see the extremes of it, like the people that just are just grinders. And granted, they've got a lot to show for the work that they've done, but at what cost, these people are always on the edge of their sanity. They're always on edge. So I think you're right. And that's one of the things that I've been seeing, or at least hearing a lot of, is people talking about, like I had a conference call today, with some companies at work. And like one of the things that they did were like, okay, so why don't usually for every conference call, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, anyone not familiar with conference calls for work, normally what you do, if you're not talking to people that you talk to often, is you'll set up introductions. And I am blah, blah, blah. This is what I do. And like today, we did it where we shared like an interesting thing that we've been doing since everyone's been locked up at home. And two calls that were like this with quite a few people. So I heard quite a few people talk about the things that they're doing. And like almost every person was talking about, I'm doing X thing that I've always wanted to do, but haven't, but I'm doing it now because I have the extra time. And I'm interested to see what comes of that. Right. So you basically have like a majority of the nation right now getting a chance to kind of dabble in that thing that they've been thinking about doing for years.
Oh yeah, like that one's going to be huge. I mean, what's really funny with it too is, and this is the part where I hope people kind of catch on to this stuff, is the fact that like the way that we design work in general, just the way that we design just labor in and of itself, is that if you don't go home feeling like you got hit by a train, you didn't try hard enough. You know what I mean? So people, they'll go to work, they'll do their whole thing. And then by the time they get home, they only have enough energy to, get the kids to bed, watch some Netflix, and go to sleep and repeat the next day. But now, because people are doing the work at home, or people that, maybe they were just taking some of the time off and they've exhausted how much time they can comfortably sit in front of a TV doing nothing, and they're starting to get antsy and wanting to move around and do stuff. They're starting to realize that they can use that time to do the things they want, that they actually have downtime, and said downtime could be put towards things that they want to accomplish in life. What a novel concept.
Yeah, right. And I mean, and it could be just menial shit too, right? But like, that changes people, the ability to do something, even if it's just playing video game. Like one of the guys that was on one of the calls today, like one of the things that he talked about, or that we're sitting there talking about, what are you doing now? And he was saying, I've been really into gaming, but not been into it. He's like, I've been super interested in it, but I haven't been able to do much of it. So He was saying, so I got into gaming as with my free time. Right. And let's say that this guy is a guy, and I don't know this guy from Adam, so I don't know what his life is like. I'm all just working, and these made up stories here, but let's say that this guy's a really stressed out dude. And let's say he's got a ton going on all the time, and it's really affecting his life, the people that he interacts with on a day-to-day basis, and him, on a personal level, right? It's stress and stuff really weighs you down. And he's never felt like he's had enough time to do that. And let's say that him doing this now, he has an outlet. Right? Yeah. He can sit down and he's playing these games. Like I think he said he was playing like FIFA and Assassin's Creed or something, right? And let's say that him doing that is like, oh man, holy shit. I'm decompressing for like the first time in 10 years. Yeah. This is really nice. That is a substantial quality of life improvement. Yeah. That this person is experiencing for the first time in maybe ever. Right? Yeah. That feels like it could be substantial.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think just to kind of start wrapping stuff up here, that any of the directions these things could go, right now it's all, speculative, but there's a lot of net positives that could come out of this. There's a lot of just mindset changes, like for all the talk that you see for, things about libertarianism or politics in general, we're trying to get people to, act a certain way or think a certain way, or being able to get that kind of, like, for lack of a better term, just the Overton window shift. All of that is based on a very fundamental change in mindset about how your world can work. And, it's unfortunate it takes something like this, but sometimes it takes a major crisis for people to kind of shake the cobwebs away. And I hate the fact that I'm about to use this term, but kind of shoo the spooks away, to be able to actually take a look at things as they are and say, wait a minute, you know what? This all could be different. We could change all of this and it would be for the better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, well, and I was thinking about this earlier, and it's hard to say because I don't know. I'm only kind of basing off of like what I'm assuming people might be going through based off stuff I hear, or based off of what I can imagine the situation being like for people in different circumstances. And I think for a lot of people, they may have been in these positions where they weren't really happy with the direction that life was going in. And this is kind of like a free reset. Now, I don't want it to sound like when I say like a free reset in the sense of like this is any kind of easy for people experiencing hardships here. There's no doubt in my mind that this is terrible and stressful for a lot of people, right? But maybe someone has been in a situation where they hate their job, they hate the relationship that they're in, they feel like they're stuck, right? And the situation came about and they weren't able to afford the place that they were with, that they were at with their partner, which led to them having the courage. But you know what? I'm just going to break it off because I got to go stay with my parents anyway. And I lost my job and I need to, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So like it provides them with that chance to hit the reset button that I'm not sure would have existed otherwise. And yes, obviously it's unfortunate the circumstances in which that reset had to happen, but it's not often that those kind of things come about when it's like that. And it's not like these people have a choice. It's like reset, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. It's like, usually when I quote these things, I like to know at least where I'm quoting it from. I can't remember the source right now, but I remember it was a book or a movie where one of the characters basically says, if there's the worst thing that you can ever wish your enemy is contentment, because it means they'll go nowhere. And it's like, I remember that one line because it's just, it's so it's so accurate in the sense that if you find yourself perfectly happy with where you are, or at least it's acceptable where you are, you're never going to make a change to get somewhere out there. Like, it takes a major event like this to shake people out of that complacency and to give them that opportunity to say, okay, maybe this is my chance to step back, take a look, and make a better step forward.
Yeah, man. I really like this because I feel like, first of all, I feel like every time we talk, by the time you're like, we're going to have to start wrapping this up, in my head, I'm like, what the fuck? I feel like I just got started.
Right.
Maybe that's just us. We could just go on for days about this stuff.
Definitely got to have you on more often, man.
Oh man, I'm down. I'm all about it. I love this
stuff. I'm abusing the fact that you're in quarantine and in the sheltered state right now, because now you don't have an excuse. You don't have to get up early the next day or any of that crap. So
I know. I'm usually hard to pin down. I stay so damn busy. But
right.
No, this is good. And I also liked it because I like talking about this kind of stuff, like the human condition. Right? Like, it's not all about markets and economics and politics and policy. Those things are clearly important, but I think it's interesting to talk about the human condition sometimes and things that every other libertarian is not going on about all the time. I don't know if you could hear me rolling my eyes and throwing my head back in frustration as I said that. But like, man, has this not been like such a good example of like, oh no, someone farted somewhere. It's funny because like just that isolation of someone farted somewhere from my clip. No, literally anything happens and libertarians are like, well, my 15 friends need to hear my hot take on this new thing. And the worst part is that the libertarian hot takes aren't these unique things. They're just not. I'm sorry to any libertarian out there listening. It's like, I can predict what you're about to say and the 3 points you were going to make. Like that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, when you can predict what it's going to be before it's said, it's not a hot take anymore, right? It's just a take.
If the take was any colder, it'd be my ex's heart. Like, it doesn't work. Like I think the one that I've like been coming across a lot is and I mean, I'll preface this by saying, like, it is a legitimate concern. Like, I understand that there's like a legitimate concern to have for this, but a lot of people are saying, look at the government being able to shut down the entirety of society this quickly, and this is a great example of why we need to stand up and fight against it. And it's like,
who is shocked by this, by the way? Right.
Like, what libertarian is surprised at the fact that the government was able to shut down society? Isn't that the entire reason we were like against them? Like,
yeah, it's written on the fucking box. You know what I mean? Like, it's what languages. Everyone expects the government to do. Right now, whether or not you agree with it, that's fine. That's fair. But this whole thing to where libertarians are bringing it up like it's some kind of gotcha. Like, oh yeah, you see, it's like, yeah, no, we got it. I think everyone was pretty much clear on that from the get.
Yeah. Even, like, I'm pretty sure the people that support the government were clear on that, and that's why they like the government, is because they can do shit like this.
Right.
Like
exactly.
Who was surprised by this, or just the like the back and forths over Rand Paul having corona, or like
it's just any bullshit, right? Like libertarian, they just want to turn everything into the world. Here's what trips me out about libertarians is it's like, I don't know on what, and I don't mean to say that so broadly, like some libertarians, if that makes people feel better, but like you get
most of you,
a good majority of y'all motherfuckers. Right. So everyone's a conspiracy theorist, first of all, right? Like every libertarian's a conspiracy theorist, which is endlessly hilarious to me, because it's like, on one hand, you're sitting there saying that like the government is full of just these inept, like just complete idiots who are not capable of rubbing two brain cells together. And then like coronavirus pops up and they're like, this has been planned. This is planned. This has been this is a conspiracy for the very tough social engineering, and there was a strategy for with the Illuminati. And it's like, well, like pick one, right? Like, is this a bunch of like trained monkeys? It's like locked in a room who can't do anything, or is it like a master plan that's been worked on for like years and years?
The virus was orchestrated by Big Poop to sell more toilet paper. Like,
right. You can't have both of those things true at the same time, right? Like the government can't be run by idiots, but also everything is a conspiracy led by like these strategic masterminds.
Yeah, it's, you know, I mean, this one just gets my blood boiling with some of this shit too. And the funny thing is, try this out. Try this at home, kids. You know where the conspiracy theorist stuff started? Like if you go way, way back. A lot of this stuff started because of legitimate psyops that took place during the Cold War, during the beginning, where the Russian government was legitimately trying to create a whole bunch of crazy random theories in the hopes that people would be stupid enough to hate their government and undermine the belief in the American government and American way of living during the early Cold War. The problem is Americans took that and ran with it.
Yeah, Russia's really good at that shit.
Yeah, it's like, when was the last time you heard of like an Indonesian conspiracy theorist?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's some guy in Italy, talking about, you know, how like big pasta is behind the government. Like, it's a very like, it's as American as apple pie and muscle cars. You know? Like
it really is. It's a trip.
And you try to tell them that, oh yeah, it's because one government picked on another government, and all of a sudden you have like, you can hear like an audible gear snap in some like libertarians' heads when they're like, so wait, one government did this to convince another government and it was the commies? Like there's just like an automatic snap at that. Yeah, right.
It does not compute.
It's fucking hysterical. Well, it does not compute. Like a lot of these people are like, I don't think there's a lot of libertarians when they start discussing these topics, like just throw a hot topic item out there. I don't think there's a lot of them that could pass like a Turing test. Like no. I don't think that they could convince a person that they're an actual person with the way that like predictably, like within X period of time, this will be said. Like you can time it down to 3 days to hear the first pro-gun arguments after any mass shooting.
No, yeah.
You can time it down to about 6 to 8 hours anytime Trump does something that could be considered a positive. Mm-hmm. Like it's almost like 2:00 that maybe it's just the way like Facebook organizes libertarian feeds, but give it the right time frame, right? Yeah, exactly, right? Like they're going to care about all 12 of us, right? But you go through like any of the things that come up, like within the first like 3 days of this whole thing going on, immediately there was defenses of capitalism for them being able to restock the shelves because that wouldn't have happened in communism.
Right.
This was before communists were talking about capitalism failing. Like they took that as a note, and they're like, they took that as a note, and it's like, okay, look, here's what happens to capitalism when it's put under stress. And it's like, okay, you know, defending against that, 100% understand and agree. And it's kind of predictable from them to make that move. But they were throwing that defense out there before the hit was coming. You know what I mean?
It's getting so convoluted out there now. I mean, it really, like, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, things are getting so nut. Like, someone shared a picture of like some dude taking a shit on the street in like LA or San Francisco or something like that. One of those places where that happens a good deal. And they were like, I think the caption with what they posted was like, "Here is society on socialism." And it's like, wait. Hold on.
What?
Hold on now. You might want to walk that back a little bit, bud. Like, where have we gotten this bad to where you get the
we're reaching levels of stupid I didn't think were possible. What the fuck is that?
Well, because it's crazy is because it's like objective kind of understandings of truth are really kind of just going into the toilet, right? Like,
unlike anyway.
Oh God. So, but like, if you like, seriously though, like if you think about it, and like we'll put it in the context of the topic that we're talking about here. You think about what's going to happen next, right? And there's a couple ways that it can go that you think that people could think, and I think that what most people would want or would hope is that on both sides, I'm sure, is that people would take planning more seriously, and it would help make people understand that when any time something like this can pop up, and it can really shake you and rock your life if you're not prepared. And I think everyone's feeling that. I think that's safe enough to say. But what's going to be interesting to me is to see if a majority of people, like, given what we were just talking about, how like everything is just now, like there is no truth and anything can be anything. If people kind of take that and just use that as a reason to say, this is why we need like full straight up communism.
Well, I mean, we're seeing
that
already.
Or if they're going to say, this is why we need to be more responsible, right? Personally responsible, financially, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I'm killing myself laughing because, like, a month ago, before all this was popping off, just a month ago, the amount of people in, like, libertarian circles or even Republicans or the like that were chomping at the bit to take the piss out of Andrew Yang over UBI and go after the Democrats for the economic damage of UBI.
They're like, where's my Trump bucks?
Yeah, like people are sitting around wearing MAGA hats, knuckle shuffling, like just like, oh, the money's coming. How dare they stop this? Those damn Democrats getting in the way, stopping me from getting my check that I didn't want in the first place.
Hey, by the way,
how does that work?
What a timeline are we on, right? To when the Republican socialism bill got denied because the Democrats didn't feel it was financially responsible. What the fuck?
Right. The parties flipped back finally.
Holy crap.
Rubber band effect in full.
Dude, these headlines have been just a trip. And it's like, it's nuts watching these conferences. I've been trying to shut myself up. I'm working remote. I think I mentioned, right? And so I'll turn on the news, even just like I'll open Hulu or something, and just like put it on in the background just so I can hear it. It's, want to hear what's going on. And like, so I've been listening to stuff, and like I heard the other day, I was listening to the address that Trump gave when he basically said like he wants to get things going again. And I largely find the man to be like primarily a garbage can, in the form of a human, but that doesn't mean that everything he does is always wrong. And I think that this situation, it is true that it is very complicated, right? And I think that anyone mostly concerned with the medical field is going to say everyone needs to stay home no matter what. And I think that anyone mostly concerned with finances and our economy is going to say we need to figure out what we can do to get people back to work as soon as possible. And those things right now in this situation, they're diametrically opposed. And it's very difficult to figure out what the worst thing is. But I don't think, and like I heard Trump talking, and he was saying stuff like, there are states like New York, there are states like California where we're seeing these numbers. People are now starting to learn about exponential growth for the first time and what exactly that means, right? And there's some states where that is a lesson that is being taught at a much more rapid rate than other. What Trump essentially said was, we want to look at the opportunity into opening things up more in these states where they're not seeing these kind of crazy exponential growths. And other states are going to have to continue doing what they're doing to blah, blah, blah. I find that to be a completely reasonable statement, right? My opinions of the guy notwithstanding. And you go on CNN, and they're like, this guy's contradicting himself. Trump says that this is very serious, but he also wants to start opening up things as soon as possible. And to me, it's like, fucking shit, are we that bad at like critical thinking at this point? I mean, I know the guy sucks, but
well, it's like, you know what? Like having a major city shut down because of just how much interaction there is in a major city, 100% makes perfect sense. But, you know, there's no reason to like shut down the 4 places that are open in some podunk town in Kansas. Like it's just
where
unnecessary.
Maybe they have a case, right? In like in the whole county.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Like,
like in that case, maybe whatever. Okay, sure, fine. Like up here, like we have a similar situation with the Ontario Premier, who's, I'll translate that into American, the governor.
Nah.
Our equivalent of that. But
I thought you called him your prime magician. This has been a learning experience for me.
No.
Does he wear a top hat?
He could, well, he does in any of the like editorial comics. Okay. They usually like throw stuff like that on there to make him try to look like a really fat Monopoly man for some reason, when he looks like nothing like it other than just being like really fat and the brother of that Toronto mayor that was caught on crack.
Oh, was it Rob Ford? What was his name?
Yeah, Rob Ford was the one. It's Doug Ford. He's in charge of the province now.
Brother's name is Duck?
Doug, yeah.
Oh, Doug. Duck. Okay, I was going to say Robin Duck.
Okay, listen. We might be a little bit fucked up here, but we're not going to like the guy named Duck, okay?
No, don't let me get you off track. Go ahead, keep going.
But we have a similar situation up here with him, where he basically got elected on the same kind of premises that Trump did, which was, you know, big bonuses for like getting businesses going. Economy is going to be pushed forward. I don't buy PC culture. Like he basically was riding coattails up here to try to like build on that same kind of hype.
Sure.
So one that's been, maybe it's just because Canadians are like slightly more polite with their politics, but it's been good to see that the partisanship, at least in like our province here, has completely fallen by the wayside, because he's like saying, yeah, no, this is what can work. This is what can't work. Here's how we hit a balance point. You know, we're going to list these types of businesses that are going to be essential services, government offices. You know what? We don't need them. We're going to keep them closed. Any of that stuff can either wait or can be taken care of remotely by select staff. That stuff we're just going to shut down for now. You don't need to go to a skating rink in the middle of an outbreak. That can wait. Things like getting yourself food, takeout places, those people still need to get fed, like the customers, but also like the people that have jobs there. That's probably their only income and they can't afford to not have something. So those places, you guys can stay open. We're going to work something out to make this happen so that you guys are as safe as possible and just kind of go through from there. Like his approach has been like completely counter to who he is as a person, because it's so like even-headed and reasonable so far.
Yeah. And I mean, look, there's other things that can be done. I don't know what they are. I'm not going to go and sit there and try to say like I know what they are. Like I would be a terrible central planner. Right? I don't believe in doing it. Having said that, those that are in a position to centrally plan, I think it's extremely possible to do 2 things at once, in the sense of keeping people safe from something that's getting bad and trying your best to manage keeping an economy from going down the drain.
Yeah, I mean, like if we're going to take the central planning approach for all this sort of thing, like the only way that you're going to quote unquote kill the virus is if there was a literal global lockdown, shutdown, no one goes anywhere for 2 weeks while this thing dies on the surface of everything, and then we just pop back up and go back to normal. That's the only potential theoretical way that you're going to have a quote unquote perfect solution to this, except that's physically impossible to make happen.
Well, and even if it did happen, right? Like it would grind the economy down to a halt, which comes with its own problem.
Oh yeah.
You know, yeah, I mean, like the whole entire country losing their jobs, not a great situation to be in either.
Well, it's like I got into a conversation with in a lefty group there. They were railing on about how atrocious the general existence of landlords are, because landlords are still expecting rent during this because things tick on, and they've got mortgage payments and everything else like that to consider. So that was a whole other argument for a whole other day. But the thing that I just found really, like, in those conversations that it was just killing me, like just making me laugh here, was the amount of people that were constantly talking about how the quote unquote evil capitalist economy is killing people. And they're all the ones that are advocating to just like shut everything down for the sake of the virus. And it's like, okay, you guys are the ones that are supposed to know what the stats are as far as death by economic turmoil. Like, if this thing,
right, that's a great point, right? Like, aren't you guys the leading, like, capitalism has killed X amount of people?
Yeah, it's like this virus could literally infect the entire planet. And based on its current kill ratio, which is around 3%, which, well, let's give it a nice buffer zone. Let's say up to 5%. Up to 5%. Okay. That's a hell of a lot of people across the world. That is a hell of a lot of people. But if the entire global economy crashed, and I mean crashed, not like 2008 where, a couple automakers were feeling their wallets a little bit lighter. Like, I'm talking like a hard, worse than Depression era crash. Long term, probably more bodies, just from the economic impact of it. Yeah, like, you got to think like
generational. That's generational too.
Yeah, right? It's like it's going to set back like at least like 3 generations of bloodlines. The people that were, like the lower end of middle class, or anyone that was anyone that was in quote unquote lower class.
Yeah, it totally sets the tone. It totally sets the tone for generations afterward too, right? If you yeah, I don't need to stay on it, but I think that's absolutely correct, right? Like, being sick affects one. I don't want to say one person, right? But it's not a generational. Like, granted, losing someone, it can have an impact, right? That spans something, but something like losing your job, being homeless, right? Like that turns your life upside down completely.
And I mean, the one thing that I know that some places have solutions for it, but I still think one of the funniest things I've seen in this, and maybe this is because I'm a cold, heartless bastard, but just all the jokes about how the hell homeless people are supposed to self-isolate.
They just, it's funny.
Like, stay in your homes. Homeless people just looking and just staring. Just, oh yeah, I'll get right on that.
There's not as many people now. They're going to have an easier time socially distancing because there's not as many people walking around. I wish that were the case though, but there is, right? So now we have a shelter in place, at least here where I'm at. We're allowed to go like running or walk your dog or do whatever, right? Like, aside from being able to go to your job if you need to, or go to get whatever. And there's not National Guard walking down the sidewalks to make sure this is adhered to. It's pretty loose. Most people, at least around me, were more than happy to do it anyway because they're terrified of getting coronavirus. But there's more. I've noticed more people out, right? So they were saying, oh, it's okay to walk, to run, to walk your dog, to do this. And so now what I'm seeing is there's just tons of people out walking and running and walking their dogs. So well, I don't know. I don't know if there's less people on the street. I may have refuted myself.
And I mean, besides, like, really, realistically, if the homeless people need to self-isolate, they just need to hold up a sign asking for anything, and most people are just going to walk by without even looking anyway. So,
oh my God.
Homeless people know social distancing as it stands. Most people stay at least 12 feet away.
That's right. I know. Some of these places are taking it's a trip, man. It's the one of the weirdest things about this for me has been just how quick people about face on their political opinions. You would think that you've got people pegged when it comes to
like the complete lack of, like, it showcases a lack of principles. I mean, like, you see this hardcore, like, I expect it with Republicans. I expect it with Democrats. I expect it with just people who are like conservative or liberal or this or that. Like, I expect it. The amount of libertarians that are either going like hard left or hard right, or are demanding that the government do more during this crisis. It's like, how are you an ANCAP asking the government to give you a financial like handout?
People
like,
that are doing both. They'll do both within like 3 weeks, right? Like they started out like it's a conspiracy. Fuck all this. Go outside. The flu is worse. This is bullshit. Fast forward to 2 weeks. Where's my check? I'm struggling. People are dying. This is serious.
Right?
They're like, really going through it, man.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think that the whole "there's no libertarians in a crisis" thing is vastly incorrect, because most of the solutions to be able to hit a balance point has been to just do the stuff libertarians have been talking about for years, like pulling back taxes, taking away, like, delaying property tax and removing that a little bit. Just a whole one, like deregulations as far as just staffing in general was concerned. Like I know Trump was talking about getting rid of the payroll tax, just things like that. All the stuff that helped deregulation from the FDA, because they held up coronavirus testing by like 6 weeks, whereas it could have been out that much faster, but the FDA got in the way, and now everyone's actually clamoring to get the FDA to literally just fuck off forever.
The problem with that, though, is that there has to be some kind of postmortem where people look at stuff in honest and objective ways, and I'm not sure that's going to happen.
No. Well, people will look at it in honest and objective ways, by which they mean they'll find a way that it makes their political views correct from the get-go.
Yeah, that's like what I was talking about earlier, which is like it's really unfortunate, because instead of people rethinking stuff and really trying to find, granted, hopefully some people do. I'm not saying that everyone is completely daft, but I think for a lot of people, it's exactly right. Like exactly what you said, right? They're just going to look for a way to make this validate the narrative that they're already towing the line for.
Yeah, it's like, again, I could go on for hours about just people's hypocrisy when it comes to politics. Like, I think that, politics is one of those issues where, like most other issues, we can reach a solution. Like, not just for like one particular issue or one particular like time frame for something, but like when you look at the medical field, they go through different diseases and they put their efforts towards solving those issues. They have debates, they have discussion, they have competing research, all that stuff. And eventually it all culminates in solving that problem. And then they move on. Economics, like through the study and development of models and doing everything like that, certain economic laws can be found and then become the basis of better models. There's progress. You actually see a development. You see things going forward. And that's in a field as subjective as economics. Politics is feelings with stats attached.
Yeah. This is the worst.
It's like, it doesn't matter what you put in front of people, because politics becomes, it touches on so many of the inherent just tribalisms in people. It creates the tribe. It's got almost the religious vibe to it when it comes to certain doctrines and tenets and stuff like that, because people can't separate principles from morals. Like, people have a hard time treating those two things as separate, or being able to develop them, co-independent of each other, like be able to just treat each thing as their own. And because of that, it's hard for someone to look at something politically and say, okay, I was wrong on this, so I need to change the way that I look at things to make my general worldview just more solid, so it accounts for this.
And not only that, but and I agree. I think those are especially the thing with the principles and morals. I think that's a very good point. I'd like to add to that, in that I feel like for the longest time it was just kind of, and granted there's always exceptions to the rule, right? But by and large, it's kind of been like politicians are just kind of like waiting room wallpaper when it comes to personalities. Right. Yeah. Like they all kind of said the same things in the same way. It was always kind of like that really like just the kind of controlled approach at speaking, and everything was always appropriate and proper. And like, you know what I mean? Does that kind of what I'm saying make sense, right? Like the personality was just kind of cardboard for politicians by and large, for the most part, for a long time. And now we're kind of in this different environment where politicians have personalities like reality TV stars. And,
quite literally, one got elected.
Exactly right. But but it's not just him now at this point. You know what I mean? Like each side has got their, whatever. Like you got AOC as an example of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's all over the place. Like Pelosi's thing is like, she's like, oh, she's a fighter. She's tough and blah, 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 blah. So
she's the matriarch of Karens.
And she is.
Like
that's good. But I feel like these personalities are now a part of it too. Yeah. Right. And it's not only a matter of like, well, do I agree with this thing or don't I? On a very basic level, kind of using critical thought and examining what's going on here. Now it's also, do I agree with this or don't I? But wait, let's also consider, do I like or dislike the kind of personality that this came from?
Yeah, I mean the personality thing, one of the things I hate about politics in general is the fact that it ultimately boils down to a popularity contest. But the main thing with the personality, like I see a benefit in it simply because most of the time when a politician says, this is my plan of attack and this is what I'm going to do, about 80% of it gets finished in the first 100 days. And you got no idea what they're going to do in the rest of their term. Like, I mean, take a look at Trump. Trump had pretty much everything that was on his list that he could pass without just throwing an executive order around. He had almost everything that he was looking to get done within the first 6 months. Whatever he wasn't done was either automatically voted down or, he cited some reason or another to not do it. And then everything after was just him pulling at stuff out of thin air where just, he just came up with these ideas or was just in reaction mode to something else that was going on, where like that's where the personality part comes in, like trying to figure out, okay, so what are they going to do once they're done with their initial promises? And I think as terrible as it is, and I mean, it really just helps build the case against having elected officials in general. And then just, I mean, that can go into the whole direction of just why anarchy is better, but without getting into that rabbit hole.
Now you're speaking my language. What's that?
Right. Without getting into that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Why political parties in general are terrible trash. And I'm over here like, yeah, keep it going.
Exactly. It's like, but you need that personality thing to stop your country from having another like Woodrow Wilson.
Right.
Like that guy was like, if you go through any of the histories on him, that guy was cardboard and he did what he said he was going to do. And then he came out with a whole bunch of shit that basically led to World War II, that like helped lead to World War II and America's involvement and all that stuff with it. And it's like, could have avoided if people could actually like figure out who the fuck this guy was before they elected him.
Right. Well, it's all very interesting, right? Because there have been plenty of people that had completely reasonable and appropriate personalities, possibly publicly, right? Mm-hmm. And their policies were absolute garbage, right? Like terrible, horrible, immoral, inhumane garbage. Mm-hmm. But they talked okay, right? They got on a podium and their personality seemed decent. So, and it makes you wonder, why are people better at accepting atrocities and immoral behavior when it's presented by someone that can talk nice, right? As opposed to someone who may be a literal walking pile of garbage, but actually has made somewhat decent policy decisions. Which one deserves to be condemned more, right?
And I mean,
it's interesting.
I'll loop this back to the COVID stuff too, because we were talking about the conspiracy theorists with COVID, which, for all the stuff that we're talking about that will happen or could potentially happen post this global pandemic. I don't think conspiracy theorists are going anywhere, unfortunately. But when we look at those, I think we can explain both that and the conspiracy theorists in general based on just one simple thing. It doesn't have to be rational. It just has to sound rational for people to accept it.
Yeah, well, that's the dangerous part, right, about conspiracy theories. And I think that's why you see so many otherwise fairly intelligent and put together people just kind of fall off the deep end when it comes to that conspiracy theory stuff, is because it could be something that seems totally rational. And it could be something that's completely fabricated and made up. When you're talking about conspiracy theories, both of those things are totally fair game.
Yeah, and I mean, like, to their credit, sometimes certain conspiracies end up being proven true. Google the USS Liberty. It's one of those
Operation Northwoods or whatever. I mean, yeah, there's tons of stuff.
Yeah, like these things have happened. There's is cause for concern with it. Yeah. But at the same time, like, if you see a picture of the planet and you're automatically assuming it's a fisheye lens of something flat and you're being conned, you
could always build a rocket and go die trying to fucking take a picture of it.
Exactly. Like, please make sure to crowdsource for a vasectomy. Like, just for everyone else's sake. We'll pay for it and then let you go and take all that time to try to prove the earth is flat. Just to get yourself out of our gene pool.
You've got some fucking truthers that are going to be discontinuing their loyalty.
Well, that's okay, because they could find out the coordinates of where I live, but then they'll never get here because they'll be off by hundreds of miles because of the curvature of the earth. Fucking miss me by fucking 10,000, miss me by 1,000 miles because they're aiming in a straight line.
Episode. I feel like I'm like keeping myself from diving into a whole tirade right now about all of this.
Well, it's like with the COVID thing, like just being a shit on my author page. If you're not following me already, go on Facebook and find me Killian Hobbs -author on there. Just to be a shit, I posted a conspiracy theory that Canada's the one that's behind all this.
I saw that.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, I got messages to the page, like, sorry for the people listening if I'm outing you on this one, but I got messages to the page that are like, where did you learn this? What's your source?
So that's exactly my point, though.
My source is my ass, which I pulled this from. Like,
that's exactly what I was talking about, though. It's like you can take someone and like read them like the Operation Northwoods, if that's the right name. If it's not, yeah. I'm sure.
No, that's the right one. Yeah.
Okay. All three listeners, no offense, on the Facebook post. Look, listen, I'm not trying to be mean, but look, why does no one interact? Like, no one interacts with the posts when we put them on a page, right? So I'm sure you've got plenty of listeners, but they're not many of them are commenting on the podcast posts.
I mean, I kind of get it, because most of the time, let's be honest, people aren't finding the podcasts through the social media sites. Like, they'll find it, go into the thing, maybe subscribe to it. They'll listen that way, which for anyone listening, you can find the podcast or anything else on the Think Liberty Podcast Network on pretty much every major streaming service. We're linked through to pretty much everything, thanks to tech wizardry performed in the background by my wonderful guest. Most people, they're going to do that. They're going to go to the page, they're going to subscribe there, and then they're just not going to go back to the social media for that stuff.
I totally forgot where I was going with that too. I got sidetracked. I was hoping I wouldn't do that. I think I did it last time when I got one on a tangent. And it's like, you know what? I fucking forgot.
Yeah. Well, I think the last time that you had one, we were talking, the episode I had you on for free will there. If I remember, somewhere around like the 20 or 30 minute mark, I think we jumped into something about like the definition of esoteric knowledge or something like that. Like, we went way out and away from everything. Like, here we are talking about like the pseudopsychology behind conspiracy theorists and the impact of personality politics. Meanwhile, the topic for today's show, for those of us that have forgotten, including your host and guest, was actually the impact of post-society, like when it comes to the COVID-19 thing. But hopefully our ramblings have been entertaining for you.
That's what we do, though, right? Like, we're just going to go ahead and, sometimes you got to go to Maine, on your way to Washington from Arizona, right? Like, you got to. And that's fine. And that's okay.
So many sidebars that made it a dodecahedron,
Yeah, but I think it's all relevant. I think this is good stuff to talk about. I think it's interesting stuff. I'm super interested at the economic stuff going on right now, though. I really am. This battle between health and finance is super interesting to me because, like, I don't think anyone has a right answer. I don't think there is a right answer, right? Like, I think that the medical people are correct, that you got to stay home. And I think that the economic people are correct in that staying home is going to destroy the economy. I think both of these things are true. And I am eager from an interest standpoint to see what comes of society post-COVID. It's going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out.
Like, the thing that one last note that I'll throw in here, I mentioned I was like going to wrap things up like half an hour ago, but anyway, I do that.
I got you. I'm proud of myself, right? I kept us going here.
Yeah.
Welcome, listeners. Go write Killian. Tell him to keep me coming on so you can get longer podcasts.
Damn right.
Or don't. I mean, if you hated this, don't do that. So.
If I have a night where I feel like I need sleep, I'll make sure not to invite you that night.
That's fair.
But no, I think one, and this is, I guess, a little bit applicable to you too, is going to be the major shift towards e-commerce out of all this.
Yeah, man. Isn't like Amazon stopped selling like anything that isn't non-essential or whatever? That'll be interesting, and I think, but I think everyone was kind of on that boat, right? Like, everyone was kind of.
Oh yeah, it's just an acceleration of it. It's not really a like a massive shift. Like, you might have seen it where, like, if 40-50% of people were like primarily online shoppers versus occasional online shoppers, the primary number is probably well past the 50% mark now, or at least during all this.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And what I laugh at is going back to the beginning of the episode here, like I mentioned, like going to a Chinese grocer and finding absolutely everything there. I'm willing to bet that Alibaba and Wish are still making money hand over fist during all this.
Sure. I have to assume so.
Right? Like, they're probably, like, the amount of people that are bored are like, no, that's it exactly, right? Like, people still need shit. Like, this is why there's even such a thing as an essential service. And the essential service is like places that sell pet food.
Right.
Like, that's an essential service because people need to eat, or just grocers in general. Some of the stuff's really weird. Like, I don't see why, like, steel manufacturers still need to work. That makes like no sense to me.
People have got all their different. I mean, there you go, right? About like when you kind of can just like subjectively decide what's essential and what's not. It is funny because I feel like I assume that these things have been worked out more. And then something like this happens and it's like, yeah, all right, everyone's at the same place I was at then. We're just all kind of like, I don't know. We're just going to figure this out as we go.
Also, just the one last thing that I'll throw in here is, regardless of how this goes, if, for this one, I've been kind of keeping the same note on thing for the last couple epidemics that we've had with, bird flu, swine flu, SARS, MERS, all that stuff that's gone on. Just because you have Google and a Facebook account does not mean you're an immunologist.
Well,
just the same, the fact that you read, like, the fact that you know who Henry Hazlitt is does not immediately make you an economist.
Speak for yourself, buddy.
Well, we're of a different caliber. We read Hayek.
That's right. Fuck yeah, Hayek.
Fuck yeah.
All FY himself. No, it's true though. It is true. It's super funny because it's like idiots arguing with idiots about things that neither one understands. And I just sit back and like, oh, this is good. That's the beauty of not taking to social media with your hot take, is that you actually get to save that time and observe everyone else's hot takes, and you got no skin in the game. So it's just good old entertainment for you.
Oh yeah, like I love watching it because you'll see people who get like hardcore mad about it, like some generic guy that like has 50 friends on Facebook. Like that's his total reach is talking to maybe 50 people in general.
Yeah,
like that's his entire like life network right there.
That's
and
it. Yeah, that's
all of a sudden this guy's got like 200 comments on some post that he made because he decided to say, oh well, the COVID actually means Chinese originated viral infectious disease. What? I'm let me get the popcorn. This is going to be a great public ass kicking.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
The one upside with the public takes is the fact that it's a more civilized version of public stonings.
Right. It's like verbally,
it's
verbal
all the
stones.
All the entertainment and all the scars are just internal. It's great.
Yeah, you're just watching your friends get fucking bodied.
Oh man, and you know what? Like my favorite part too is it's just it's just the slap to the face some of them needed. It's like, oh well, I don't understand why this would work. It's like, well, it happens this way because if you follow the number trends, it means that you're all going to die if you don't stop touching your fucking face, you 5-year-old.
Or how about the people that took the fucking aquarium cleaner?
Oh,
did you hear about that?
Yeah, well, I'll give them a little bit of credit. I'll give them like the tiniest smidgen of credit.
Be careful. There's not much to give.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure they already got what they deserved, but
it's definitely a Darwin Award if I've ever seen one.
Oh God, yes. But the tiniest bit of, like a glimmer of hope. There has been quite a few papers that have been put out so far talking about the benefits of, I think it's
I'm not even
hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. I don't have the names in front of me. I don't know, but something about the combination of those two has been able to show either a slower or retroactive with the progress of a virus inside someone who's currently sick with it.
It's got promise, right? But like,
yeah. Like it's not showing any promise as far as a vaccine, but it's showing promise as a post-treatment.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, you have it. Let's get this into your system because you're 70 kind of thing.
I don't even know about all that. All I knew is that Trump came out and basically said like, hey, there's this drug and it could work. The FDA is going to clear it or they have cleared. I don't know a lot of what's going on in there.
That's kind of that's what it was. But then the raw chemical,
fucking saw that it was on the back of his like aquarium cleaner or something. Like I don't know what leads you to thinking ingesting aquarium cleaner is correct, right? But like he didn't try to find the medication version of this substance. He just like found out, oh, it's an aquarium cleaner. I'm gonna take that. So that's, I don't think, you see the headlines and I probably seem like I'm defending Trump here, but if you people would stop with your fucking car accident takes, then I wouldn't have to. But I mean, that clearly isn't the situation where Trump got up on a podium and said, go take aquarium cleaner, Yeah,
it's like, when it comes to anything like this, I always go back to just that old adage. If you want to really fix society, you just got to do one thing. Very simple thing.
Introduce a pandemic.
Take the warning labels off everything.
There's a comedian.
Just take the warning labels off. Do you know what? Just let people freak freely. Let natural selection actually like pick up its pace. It did a great job for millions of years. I don't know where we came along and thought we could do better.
Yeah.
Like just like, you know what? You don't
fatal conceit, right? It's
exactly.
Yeah.
You don't like, I'm sorry, you don't end up with a world where like jorts are a thing if natural selection was allowed to proceed properly. Like you wouldn't end up with a world where like incels are a thing if natural selection was allowed to proceed properly.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
You know what? Like, let a couple people get sick. Let a couple people realize that you are 5 years old again. Go ahead, touch the stove. Tell me how it is. Like this idea that we can run society on a priori knowledge is just no. Just no.
Don't even get me started. There's the next
I know. I knew as soon as I said that it was just like, okay, and I'm about to get another hour of Vinny content. Yes, it's all coming together.
Let me tell you something. Keep me worked up, buddy. Blood pressure.
I just have to throw that in the old Occam's Libertarian around, and all of a sudden we're good to go.
I was thinking about that the other day. Oh God!
Still such an apt statement, you know.
It is.
The worst part is explaining it to people after the fact, and it's just like it was a funnier joke when it was just the words.
It had to be there, yeah. But you know, that's how it works, and that's why we're buds. That's why we get along so well.
That's why it works exactly.
Yeah.
But like we're both from places that America considers communist, so I mean it works out perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're both secret commies, then I guess, right? Because we live technically in these. Well, I mean, look, according to like that guy, right? Like I live in socialism, so
yeah. Okay.
You know, this is where we're at.
Like I'm sorry, like. We literally have universal health care. We're nowhere near socialist up here. Like,
it's just crazy how blurred the lines are at this point. You've got communists posting, you know, pictures of empty shelves because we're under a fucking national emergency pandemic, and they're like, "Checkmate capitalism." And then of course posting pictures of bums shitting in the street in like the most like profitable capitalist city in the fucking country. This is what socialism does. Oh, come on.
Well, you know, it's like the libertarians taking the bait too, like where they're just like, well, actually, it's because you know the warehouses aren't empty. Those would be empty in socialism too. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't care what your fucking economic system is. All of it's going to be empty if people consume 10 times the normal amount in like a 3-day period. What the
there's
fuck
a fucking
were you
global
expecting?
crisis, and people are buying shit like they're literally gonna fucking not be able to leave their house for 3 months. It's what happens, right? Like no system can adequately deal with that.
Yeah,
you're gonna have complications. That's just what the fuck happens, right? Like,
by the way, prepper advice. Just prepper advice. You don't need to buy like 15 cartons of milk. It's not going to last long enough.
No, that's the trippy part. Is like people are buying like the bunch
non-perishables, like, cool, whatever, but
right.
Leave the fresh for people that are normal people. There is a psychological reason for that one. I was reading into that, like, why does everyone think they're going to have the shits because of Corona? Like, what's going on?
Right?
And
yeah, like
it's because it's one of the 3 staples that people can actually go for, because it's usually bread, milk, eggs, and toiletries.
Okay,
bread, milk, eggs are fresh, so the only thing they can really stockpile. Yeah,
it's just like a pre-programmed thing, right? Like a human being is like, crisis, got to buy toilet paper.
Exactly. So there's 4 things that you can kind of stockpile. 3 of which are fresh and wouldn't last if you tried to stockpile it ahead of time. So that leaves 1 item for people to worry about buying. And then obviously when some people start to buy it, it creates the mass panic of, oh shit, we're going to be out of it. And we don't know when we're going to get more. So I should buy more while I'm here.
The snowballing totally makes sense. Yeah. It's once you see it low on the shelf, then the next person's like, well, it's getting low. I better get a bunch so I don't have to, I'm not out.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if like some stores purposely pulled some of the stock off the shelves just to make it look like they're running low, so that they started buying for frenzy. Would not be surprised to see if some places tried that tactic.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if I heard that was the case.
Yeah, but I guess like officially this time, because I think we're hitting the 2-hour mark.
Wrap it up. It's time to say goodbye.
Time to say goodbye. All right. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. No, I'm not going to sing. That's not my forte.
Yeah.
Anyway, Vinny, pleasure having you on as always.
Hey, thanks for having me, bud. Let's do this more. I enjoyed it very much.
Definitely agreed. For everyone listening, I hope that through some of the stuff that we talked about, that at the very least, if it didn't give you some information, that at the very least, it kind of brought some ideas or brought some questions to mind that you might not have considered before. And, hopefully the main message really to take away from all this is try to approach things with an even head, try to take a look at all the different angles that are available to you for any of these issues that are going on, whether it's this crisis or, unfortunately, the eventual next one that we're going to see at some point in the future. Just make sure to keep an even head on that stuff. Just follow basic health practices as you get the chance. So
don't be one of the people we end up talking about. You should live your life like you're avoiding being brought up on a podcast.
Yeah, really. That's so 2020 advice, It
is. I'm going to put it on a bumper sticker.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck. But as always, if you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, I'll see you again next time.